o'clock here, and I think we've got the registered folks mostly on the line, so um, I think we could go ahead and get started here this morning, unless anyone needs another minute. All set? Okay.
Good.
All right, so hello everyone. Welcome to the Montana SBDC Small Business Webinar Series. We host this program on the first Thursday of every month, and we're fortunate to have a variety of presenters from across the state share expertise to assist small business owners. Just a little housekeeping to get started. We've got Carrie Hayes with us from the MSU Extension Center running our technical part today, so thank you for helping us with that, Carrie. And we will be recording this webinar for other people to view in the future, and just to kind of keep this great information available to small businesses online. Our webinar series has a variety of sponsors: the Montana SBDC, the Montana Department of Commerce, the SBA, MSU, and the Montana Economic Development Association, with additional support from Grow Great Falls, that hosts the Great Falls SBDC office, and the University of Montana, that hosts our Missoula SBDC office. Our SBDC program has 10 offices across the state, so we're happy to be able to bring this small business information to you to help your businesses succeed. Today we have Aaron Mugaas with us and Nick Thomas from the Montana Weatherization Training Center, and they're going to go over some OSHA and workplace safety items. Aaron is the director of the Montana Weatherization Center and has worked for over a decade as an energy auditor for Montana Weatherization and as an independent building inspector. He has a Bachelor of Science in Biology and has also extensively studied in the field of environmental science. Nick is going to be our main presenter. He's a building and science instructor at the Montana Weatherization Training Center. He grew up in Bozeman. He's worked in a variety of areas: construction, food service, sales, and he has also pulled potatoes for seasonal work. So, that sounds like a Montanan that's done a variety of things. He began working on safety committees and certifying forklift operators and doing safety inspections, and has gotten a reputation as the safety guy. Nick and Aaron are both certified as authorized OSHA outreach trainers for 1926 construction and lead renovation repair paint rule, Building Performance Institute energy auditor, and BPI quality control inspector. So I'm looking forward to learning some things during this webinar as well. There's so much in the field of safety, so it's great to be able to have this webinar and dig in a little deeper. So I'll turn it over to you, and please feel free to take it away.
All right, Aaron's on mute.
Someday I'll learn to unmute myself. Well, thanks, Jennifer, for that introduction, and thanks for having us today. We're super excited to be here. And you're lucky to have Nick doing most of the presentation today. He's got, like you said, he has a ton of background, a lot of different kinds of jobs. So, and safety is always important in any job. I'm going to give you a quick intro to what we do here at the training center, and then Nick will take it away on the safety. I know that's the main thing everybody wants to hear about. So you can go ahead and share your screen, Nick.
Right.
So we're good. Yeah, I can see it.
Great.
So we're part of the Weatherization Assistance Program, and as part of that, we're a Weatherization Training Center. The weatherization is as an assistance program to help people make their homes more energy efficient, and it was started in the 1970s during as a response to the oil crisis. A lot of different things, developed from that, and weatherization was one of those. So the mission is to reduce energy costs for low-income families and keep people safe in their homes. So it's kind of a broad mission there, but that's basically it. The training center or the weatherization program throughout the country, has a pretty big impact, and quite a bit of money is spent on homes, to make them more energy efficient. The community action agencies throughout the country administer this money and run this program. So that's places like the HRDC in Bozeman, Missoula. I can't remember the name of the one there, but
there's HRDC as well.
Yeah, HRDC as well. Okay. So we do all kinds of dirty, nasty, dangerous work in weatherization, and that's why we have at our training center OSHA 10 and OSHA 30 training, because the DOE recognized, hey, we really need to make sure people have training and how to stay safe. So these are the kinds of things we do on houses, and those things right there could add up to anywhere from $3,000 to $20,000 on a home. So retrofitting homes with insulation and air sealing is tough work, and so that's what we teach here at the training center. We teach people how to do this work. The DOE recognized we needed a systematic approach to this work, so they started these training centers in the 90s. MSU Extension Service got the grant at that time, and we've had it ever since. So we are part of the MSU Extension Department. We're kind of by ourselves over here on Frontage Road, so we're the redheaded stepchild of the Extension Service. We're one of the only housing-focused programs in Extension. They're mostly agriculture, but so we love being part of Extension. It's a perfect fit for us. So here's some pictures of our training center and kind of some folks that we've trained over the years. And that's Nick over there teaching how to blow insulation in a wall. So yeah, like I said, a big part of the work that we do and the training we do is safety. So I'm going to let Nick talk a little bit more about that. Luckily, in America, we have an organization called OSHA that has helped keep us safe. You may be a beneficiary of that yourself from something that you had to do in your workplace, or that maybe you're going to expect your workers to do. And that's all a result of a safety culture that has been, promulgated by OSHA. And so we're really lucky to have that. I've been to other countries where, there is not, much safety in a lot of workplaces. So, all right, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I'm not on mute, am I? I'm pretty sure Can everybody hear me? All right. So yeah, thanks for that intro. OSHA, it's something that you can hear a lot of stories about OSHA from different perspectives that, they came and helped me, or they came and they shut down my friend's business and they're just the devil. And you'll hear all kinds of different attitudes towards OSHA and what they do and what their role is. But Aaron brought up a great example that we can take it for granted because it's been in effect for 50 years in America, and it's been saving lives every day, and we don't necessarily notice it. And so other countries don't have OSHA or Americans with Disabilities Act, and so you do notice that when you go to other countries and just the dangers in the workplace, and so just the hazards that the average citizen might have to come into contact with. And so OSHA it was the OSHA Act was signed into law by Richard Nixon in 1970. And so it was seen as an answer to this huge construction boom that we had post World War II. We had a whole lot of people out there building dams and going out to work sites, and so many of them weren't making it home. Some large construction projects and even smaller construction projects. It was a study within the industry and within safety and health census data that they were realizing that this is something we could address, and that it should be considered an American right to be safe in the workplace. So many people understate the fact that the OSHA Act is a right, that's a constitutional amendment, and it's your right. And so OSHA is a government agency that spends all of its time just protecting your right to a safe and healthful workplace. And so a good note to make in there is that it develops employee rights to that safe workplace. And it puts the ownership and responsibility on the employer to provide you with that safe work environment. And it's important to have that communication between the employees and employers to understand that respectful acknowledgement of that right, and how we're all going to help make sure that we're not violating that our rights. And so whether you believe it or not, or remember it or not, and no one ever explained it to me this way, but you actually have the right to complain. That yes, Richard Nixon gave you the right to complain to your boss. That you don't just have the right to issue a complaint to OSHA. It is your right as a worker to complain to your boss about a hazard that you see in the workplace that you think may be a danger to your life and your health, that could cause serious injury. And that you also have a right to training. That is something that is very important. How are you going to stay safe in a job that you're not trained to handle? How dangerous a job can be will greatly increase if you don't have the training to do that. You know, if somebody just hands you the keys to a piece of heavy equipment and a backhoe and is just like, go for it, and you have no training on that, you can be a serious danger to yourself and others. So we have the rights to issue complaints to OSHA as well, and we also have the right to, as workers, to be free from retaliation. So the role of OSHA, the general duty clause, is really the heading, the big bolded headline of what OSHA does for us. And so it's the first section of the U.S. Code. So it applies to all OSHA rules, and that's that the employer shall furnish each of their employees a place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm. So this is important because in order to comply with the occupational safety standards, the employees and the employers have that responsibility to work together to identify the hazards and come up with plans and ways to mitigate those hazards. If they aren't working together on that, then we aren't going to know what hazards are there until somebody gets injured, and that's a little too late to fix it. In that general duty clause, there's the simple framework of what it takes to be in violation of OSHA's general duty clause is that you just simply failed to keep the workplace free of those hazards that the employees were exposed to, and that the employees recognized and are discussing with the employer. So the hazard has to be recognized. If nobody knew about it at all, and there's zero evidence that there was knowledge of this hazard, then, I mean, OSHA isn't going to be some unreasonable jerk about it. So OSHA tends to look at how they score an injury or an incident based on its severity and also how willful the violation was. And so if the hazard wasn't really likely to cause death or physical harm, OSHA is really not worried about a scrape, for instance, right? But exposure to chemicals, burns, and even exposure to elements are all starting to fall under OSHA's purview. But you also have to show that there was a feasible method for correcting the hazard. So, you know, these acts of God are things that are really difficult for us to plan for, are things that OSHA are more lenient to. But generally, when we look at a lot of construction and workplace hazards, we're not new to this. Many of us in these trades have been involved in the workplace and in trades for better part of our lives and sometimes in generations. So there is a lot of understanding of the hazards in the workplace that we should address. And of course, those main ones are falls, electrocutions, caught in between, the big fatal four. But any injury or severe injury or fatality must be reported to OSHA directly by the employer. Any fatality must be reported within 8 hours. Inpatient hospitalization, amputations, loss of limbs, eye losses, those things must be reported within 24 hours. And so I'll go ahead and click on a couple of these links. If you have the ability to look at this slide deck yourself and download it, feel free to click on any of these links that I've supported here. That'll show you how to make a report both as a worker or as a business as well, if you're curious about more of that. And of course, we do offer OSHA 10 and OSHA 30. If you want a whole lot more of this OSHA information, we have it for you if you would like to come and take our class. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But the OSHA inspections and violations, the way that they look at that is willful violations is when you're clearly skirting or intentionally skirting the law. And that is something that as a worker, I learned to actually take offense to, is because they're not just skirting OSHA, they're skirting your rights, So it's something to take into account when you see that workplace culture developing where your boss or maybe your business partner is kind of seeing OSHA as an enemy entity and not somebody that they are just should be compliant and helping work with to protect their workers. There could be serious violations, other serious violations, or what are considered repeat violations. When OSHA does an inspection, they will do follow-up inspections to make sure that you fixed any of the issues that were brought up. And so one misconception that I was taught early in the world of working with business and safety committees is that people say that OSHA, they're just the cop. They're just there to bust you. They're not there to help you learn the law. And I'm sure a lot of us have met that cop before. It's not my job to, explain the law to you. And it's a lot more, it's a lot kinder when you do meet a cop who does actually take the time to explain the law to you or help you follow the law instead of just busting you. And OSHA actually does have a reputation for helping people interpret and understand the law. And if you're in your first year of business and as a small business, you can take OSHA up on the ability to come do consultations, or they can hire contractors to come give you consultations and essentially do a mulligan OSHA audit, where they'll come and do an inspection on your site and show you what violations you would get, and then they wouldn't issue the fines. They just give you here's a list of corrective actions. So instead of waiting for OSHA to come find you and or waiting for somebody to tell on you, you actually are encouraged to tell on yourself and show your hand to OSHA that, hey, we care about safety and we want to follow the rules, because the rules are hard to interpret. For the average person, even a business owner, we're not necessarily legal analysts as workers and business owners. And OSHA law is written kind of in legalese. This is a good example of OSHA law that people bring up a bit, is if I'm a prime contractor and I have subcontractors below me and I have different people, like who is OSHA, concerned with? Like, who is responsible for whose safety? And I'm not a lawyer, and I can't really get into getting into specific advice on what business should follow which rules. Everybody needs to understand what OSHA rules they have to follow as an industry. And for instance, construction is under 1926 OSHA, and the rest of general industry is under 1910 OSHA. There's also a maritime safety, as well as entire other industries that are regulated outside of OSHA's jurisdiction, like mining industries have MSHA, which is a whole other mining specific safety and health administration. Knowing what your job is, what industry you work for, is going to help you understand what rules we have to follow, and what steps need to be taken to creating a safe work environment for employees. And so in general, workplace safety is seen as a culture, and it's really easy to for people to just be like, oh yeah, statistically this can happen, and you forget that these human beings are real people. Every statistic, every number is a real human being that didn't get to go home to their family. They just went to work one day trying to make bread and butter for their family, and they didn't make it home. And so prior to OSHA in 1970, 38 workers died every day in America, which was already less than it was in the 40s and 50s. But within this 50-year period, we've seen a 65% reduction in worker deaths on site. And so now it's closer to 13 deaths per day. But that is still 13 people who went to work just trying to make a living, and now they're not here with us. So if you have a morbid curiosity to some of these statistics, there is a pretty cool what's called the Fat Cat Report, Fatalities and Catastrophic Incidents Reports, from the Department of Labor. And they'll show you the day-by-day specific names of the people who did die, exactly how they died, what the inspection looked like, what the fines were on that job site as well. So Margarita Lopez got struck by a paper pallet, and those paper-loaded pallets are very, very heavy. And so that was an actual fatality in the workplace. So it's good to bring the human nature to this, that there's things that some people do dangerously in the workplace and some things that are just a hazard waiting to happen. Sometimes people are quite innocent victims to a workplace hazard, and in other cases, workers have the ability to help us stay safe in the workplace by working safely and acting safely. So it's good to bring up any stories or statistics in your workplace and talk about that, about like, oh yeah, this guy died doing this, and to really bring that human nature back to it, to where we can get a healthy fear of what we're dealing with in the workplace. For instance, my wife's cousin just died last year on a job site. He was struck between two work vehicles, so he was crushed by a work vehicle. So it's something too, the not just the OSHA side of things that had to deal with a workplace death, but the crew and everybody, like, they accidentally killed their own coworker and friend, and that's a traumatic experience for people that is measured well beyond a fine in $70,000 for an incident. So the employees have that right to complain, and so it's good to foster a good workplace culture and let them understand that you're accepting of their complaints, and that one worker or one safety manager alone can't know all the rules and regulations and all the possible hazards on a work site. It takes everybody working together, and kind of I talk about the prairie dog kind of mentality, that the more eyes we have on site and the more communication we have, the safer we're all going to be, to have that herd mentality. So employers should really utilize the workers as their eyes on the job site, and take their perspective into account. So here's another quick link too. I'd like to remind people, the Department of Labor YouTube is totally worth subscribing to, between just learning more about labor standards, how to protect yourself on the work site, as well as some how-to guides to following regulations and finding training, and just all kinds of good information. So hit that like and subscribe button for their YouTube. It's definitely worth checking out. So the Toolbox Talks is a good time and place to get people together at the end of a day or at the end of a week, to schedule regular time and say that this is a good time for us to talk about this. A lot of people see hazards during the workplace and they do a lot of stuff and they get all upset about it and spun out in their head thinking about it. But then by the end of the day, they're just trying to pack stuff up and head out. And there may be a missed opportunity for everybody to get together and discuss, like, how are we going to eliminate some of these hazards if we can get rid of them? Why would we suffer through these hazards in a workday. And so there are templates and other specialized trainings that people can take. Here's one from a .com. There are independent agencies and training groups and contractors out there that can go give specialized safety training to businesses to help them be compliant and help them mitigate hazards. So what they call about what's called the hierarchy of controls is a really good way of understanding how to create a safe workplace. And that's, if possible, we're eliminating the hazard or substituting the work with some other safer type of work. Maybe engineering a control to isolate them from it, like guardrails, or putting up yellow tape or paint on the floor so people know not to walk here. So the company comes up with some physical barrier, some way of stopping people from going into a hazardous place, like hard hat area. Those kind of things. And then administrative controls, like telling people, well, we always clean and put away our tools at the end of the day in this order. We unplug things in these machines. So actually creating rules that people have to follow is another example of reducing those hazards. But overall, the least effective last thing you want to do is just tell people to mask up and just get in there. So just putting PPE on a person without any proper training or without any administrative controls, they're still in a dangerous place. So PPE is really the last barrier that we have to stay safe, our personal protective equipment. And so that should be always taken into account, that we should try to mitigate hazards all the way from the top down. If we have to expose them to the hazards, then we finally do give them the training and equipment to go into those dangerous workplaces. So of course, this all has to be in writing. Otherwise, legalese wise, it's hard to be compliant or prove that you're compliant without having written protection plans or some sort of safety training built into your business. A good example are these like OSHA printouts, these actual fall protection guides right here. These are great. These are for businesses. This is how to set up a safety plan for your business. And so OSHA has a very good list of sample programs and training guidelines. If you're really worried more about having to create a confined space or safety rescue plan for your employees. And that also includes, possible evacuation plans, those things. And so we offer, specific to OSHA 1926 construction, we offer OSHA 10 training here at the Weatherization Training Program, which is designed more for the workers to identify hazards. And then OSHA 30 is 30 hours of OSHA training, and that's more for business owners, managers, crew leads, to develop the sense of who the competent person is on site and who's responsible with first aid training and more of the nitpicky little bits of OSHA. So we offer training for both of those programs. And so I've got a little bit of time left here. I didn't want to go too far past 30 minutes. I didn't know how long you wanted us to go or leave time for Q&A. So I was just wondering, Jen, how am I doing?
Oh, yeah, you're doing great. If you have more information I want to share,
Mm-hmm.
we could consider that. Also, I'm kind of interested in hearing from, the folks on the webinar here a little bit maybe about what business you're with, or if you had any specific questions. Would that be okay if they asked more specific questions, Nick?
Yeah, and I think that right now is a good time to do that. The rest of the presentation was just going to be about some of the stuff that we see in weatherization specific and kind of like how we train people to get around these hazards and just how to stay safe in the workplace. And so that's specific to us. That's something that, we had to develop a training program in alignment with weatherization standards. And so, yeah, I'm curious to see what trades some of these people are in the call and what kind of hazards you're seeing in your work sites. Yeah, so feel free.
Well, let's take a couple minutes to do that. Feel free to put questions in the chat or to unmute and ask a question. Maybe while you're thinking about that, I did have a question that I thought of, Nick.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there are guidelines from OSHA on how to help employees after a traumatic accident.
Oh, right. And so I've seen there is consultation for for mental health, as well as just how to respond and get legal defense for whistleblowing and for retaliation. So if it turns out to be a hostile work environment, where bringing up hazards to your employer isn't being taken seriously, then that can create a hostile work environment. And so OSHA does have let me see where that was, see if I can find that link. But yeah, to just help you follow, um, so how to help you actually deal with that. It's a really complicated scenario to have to use OSHA to sue a boss. It's definitely not recommended to go right to the sue happy standard. And OSHA really does recommend that everything, if can be dealt in-house, should be dealt in-house, that if you can fix anything between you guys, it's not like OSHA just wants to dive into everybody's interpersonal issues. But if it gets to that point where you cannot get through to your boss this need for something to get fixed, or if you feel like they're trying to fire you for bringing it up, then you do have legal protections, and they do offer legal assistance for that.
Thank you. Looks like we do have a question here in the chat. Deborah is asking, with telework becoming so common, has OSHA offered additional information on worker safety in their own homes?
Yeah, see, what I've read about that was very interesting, because even OSHA didn't jump on getting involved in, is COVID a workplace hazard, or is that just a general hazard in the world that we carry into the workplace with us? So even OSHA had to like distance itself from, where do they fall in line with OSHA? And it's similar with subcontracting as well. Like, there is still quite a bit of a fight going on between like rideshare services and places like, are these people employees or truly independent contractors, or are they really a subcontractor? So it gets really complicated in there. But from what I understand, I'm not really authorized to interpret OSHA law specifically, so take this with a grain of salt. But as I understand it, that they're responsible for the work site that they are in charge of, and the job site that they're in charge of. And from what I understand, is that working from home doesn't necessarily qualify as a job site that the employer is providing to you, that you're self-providing. So again, don't take that to be specific law, but when I looked into it last, which was about a year ago, that's what I was finding, is that they had to distance themselves from that, being in charge of actual independent contracted workers. So if you are under, if you work for a company and then you're working from home, then there may be something that they're more responsible with providing to you. But yeah, that would be very trade specific. So I'm not very, very knowledgeable in the office work thing. I'm more of the construction trades is my specialty.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's things like, ergonomic chairs, mouses, things like, things to prevent like that whole desk. All the things
I'm spitballing here, but I was wondering, if they provided you with a computer and you got electrocuted by that computer, like, is that?
Or if you ran a staple through your finger, what's your employer's?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I haven't thought. Yeah, that's a good one to
dive into that one.
Yeah, we're gonna have to research that one.
Thank you. Deborah works in the training and development HR consulting space. Mm-hmm. So yes, she said yes, she was thinking of office safety type issues.
Yep. And so office safety falls under 1910 general industry. And it still has a lot of those, trips and slips and ADA requirements, and lots of additional training for dealing with contacting people and communicable diseases and stuff like that. And the healthcare industry is really big on that type of safety when it comes to bloodborne pathogens and sharps and many things. They have a lot more written specific plans for healthcare industry.
Yeah, I would think that we're gonna have to deep dive this, but I would think that anything that affected your safety while you're on the clock, basically, could be under OSHA. I mean, if you're hurt at your house while you're working, or you get carpal tunnel syndrome or something, doesn't really matter where you are, I would think. But we gotta, find out for sure what exactly the rules
And that's a
are.
bit of a segue on that too, is our vehicles. So going to and from job sites and driving as part of our work, so if it's even if it's not a company supplied vehicle, if you're in the process of working while driving, then that's actually one of the biggest workplace hazards out there. In fact, it's like as much as falls and electrocutions and others combined is how many people just die on the road driving as part of their job. So that's another why there's a huge concern with like subcontracting out DoorDash and stuff like that, to where now like Pizza Hut and places are offsetting that liability, where they're not necessarily responsible for the health and safety of the driver because now they're an independent contractor or whatever. So there's a lot of things shifting around in that liability side of things, but it's also seen by OSHA that a driver's license isn't necessarily proof that they have required training for that part of their job. So that was coming up recently too, is that well, they were licensed to drive. They had a certificate by state of Montana Department of Motor Vehicles that says I'm licensed to drive. Does that mean they've been provided adequate training? And OSHA said no, actually, that if driving is part of a person's job that you're furnishing them of that employment, you actually have to have some sort of written down that we told them, like, no drinking and driving, set up cones, signal and wear your safety belt and, drive safely. We still have to actually have some description that we do train people to drive safely in the workplace. So OSHA can get a little pesky about stuff like that. Just you would think that passing a driver's test makes you a good driver, but anybody who's out on the road knows that that's not true. Just because you have a license doesn't mean you're a safe driver.
Thank you. Lexi has a question. She has a retail store that she owns, but leases the space and is wondering how to handle a safety concern with her landlord. She added some specifics, saying the wooden boardwalk outside the store is starting to break and warp, and some folks are starting to trip on the boards.
Yeah, that becomes that legal discussion of if a employee tripped on those things, is that a hazard that hasn't been mitigated by the employer? Yeah, so that's difficult because you don't own that boardwalk necessarily, the landlord does. So if the employee brings it up to you and you say, hey, this is a danger and we want to get it fixed, and then you got to bring that up to the landlord to say, hey, we need to get this fixed. It isn't the landlord's, it's their legal property, and maybe it's between you and them to figure out, if it's based on your lease, is this what I'm paying for? But OSHA, it's the responsibility of the employer to mitigate that hazard. And if that means literally having to move your business to a new business that's a safer building, that's OSHA's perspective on it, is that it's still up to the business owner and the employer of those people to make sure that they're safe. And that becomes very difficult. My wife right now, she's in that very dangerous position, like trying to do HR for a business that's inside of a building that's like 100-year-old mill, and it's just, falling apart. And the landlord kind of doesn't want to fix anything. And so she's constantly fighting him on that when it comes to if there's mice in the building or any of these things, that does provide a hazard to the employees, not just like, oh, it makes us look bad as a business, but it is actually a hazard. And so she's like me, she's a little bit of a stickler for the rules. So she tends to, be kind of a thorn in their side with that. But it's as much as it's the landlord's, you're not allowed to just do whatever you want to a landlord's property. So that becomes a very weird litigious situation of how much you can pressure your landlord to do stuff. But essentially, yeah, that's the way the legal world works. If OSHA finds you, and then if you feel that, yeah, you get to sue your landlord because that they didn't let you fix this or whatever, that would have to be in those courts or whatever.
One thing I could add to that is I would probably look into also city and city codes and things as far as safety for customers.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure. I don't really know any of those laws and regulations, but there might be something to look at there that would force the landlord to fix something for, people just coming and going in the building or whatever, So anyway.
And Aaron and I have a bit of familiarity working with HRDC and working with landlords and people who run project housing. That, yeah, a lot of them, if you ask them nicely or you just ask them kindly, they may not want to deal with it. You ask them rudely, they won't want to deal with it. But if you explain it with a regulatory agency or a city official or city code, and you explain it with those things in mind, with like real world consequences, maybe they'll be a little bit more open to listening when you explain like, well, this is the rule I'm trying to follow and why, and it's not just a gripe to the landlord. But yeah, we had a lot of those unique scenarios working with HRDC as far as what would the landlord let us do in regards to fixing a structure or dealing with safety issues. But yeah, they generally don't like it when it means that they have to pay for it.
Thank you. Rebecca added a question. She says that she's in the healthcare industry and is looking at starting a private practice. Mm-hmm. Any considerations when she's getting started?
Yeah, that's definitely one where I would try to find specific consulting, like really try to find a safety specialist. That's something you can even just ask for a one-time training or one-time meeting consultation with somebody who's specific to that industry, because there's going to be a lot of things to take into account there and different levels of insurance to get involved with. So that's definitely, look into a specific safety trainer for that kind of industry is the advice I would give you there.
Is that general industry? Does that fall under general industry?
Yeah. I didn't
world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're still under general industry. 1910 general industry, which covers so many. Like it's a really big, broad perspective from office workers to retail. God, I was even seeing like a nuclear disposal was like still fell under general industry. Yeah, so very interesting stuff, and transportation as well. But I'll just wrap it up here with talking about some of the workplace hazards specific to weatherization, just to give you a little bit of a dip into what we do here with weatherization and kind of some of the ways that we have to deal with the hazards that we see in the workplace. And so, wait, I'm further past. We already got there. All right. So weatherization hazards. So the Weatherization Assistance Program, as Aaron brought up, has been around since the 70s, and it was seen that we could probably use some additional training because there's a lot of rules to follow. Being a federally funded program by Department of Energy and National Renewable Energy Labs, they make the decisions on like technically what's the most effective way for us to do weatherization measures, like installing insulation and air sealing the shell of a home, and but they don't specifically get involved in the safety stuff per se, but because we are under a state community energy programs, the community action agencies are who actually deliver these funds. So, whenever you're working with government contracts as sub-grantees for government agencies, there tends to be more rules to follow. So it becomes a little bit more to look into. So it's similar to with medical or whatever. You're going to find, I really need to do a deep dive into this specific industry's standards. So A lot of the measures we do in homes will be mechanical measures like cleaning or tuning furnaces, working on installing more ventilation, and then doing base load measures as well, working on motor controls, replacing refrigerators, installing any pipe wrap, things that can just reduce their energy burden. But a lot of the measures end up falling under Department of Health and Safety or Department of Health and Human Services purview. That we really are concerned about the indoor air quality for the clients when we leave their homes to make sure that we leave them in a better condition than when we found them is really like the bottom line here. If there's mold, we're not necessarily going to mitigate it, but if we can stop any water leaks or any structural problems and put in ventilation and just get it out of there as best as possible, putting in ground vapor retarders to slow down radon or possible moisture intrusion into the house. And so installing smoke detectors, carbon monoxide alarms as well. And so a whole lot that is on our list of things to do and a whole lot of ways to hurt ourselves as workers while we're doing it. So the standards are that we have to follow OSHA, whether think you're exempt or not under our program. We all follow OSHA, even if you have less than 8 employees, et cetera. And so we have to follow OSHA, local codes, directives from the Department of Energy, DPHHS, as well as the governor or the president can just throw out an order and we just have to follow it. So we're in a very specific place. So required safety trainings for any weatherization employee, as laid out by our weatherization program notices from the Department of Energy, says that we need to be able to identify asbestos, lead, as well as combustion safety testing to tell if there's carbon monoxide present in the home, and do basic electrical safety and testing and respiratory fitness testing. Because there's a really good chance that we're going to find asbestos in people's attics. There's a good chance we'll disturb it during our work and possibly, I don't know if you noticed, this guy's not wearing any respiratory protection, just old school. So zonalite vermiculite insulation was mined in Libby and is very common in our area to find in old homes. So as retrofit installers, it's our job to specifically go into aging housing stock and do our best to bring them up to modern energy code and mitigate any of these hazards like vermiculite. So at one point, over 80% of the vermiculite mined in America was mined right here in Libby. So it's, it was cheap and available in this area. And so the stuff was just put in everything. So it's a danger to our clients, but also to our workers once they go into that house. So any present danger that's a danger to the client will automatically be a danger to the workers when they go in there. So we're in that position to also take into account the safety of the client as well. So we're not just protecting ourselves from these dangers. In weatherization, we have to keep our clients healthy as well. So part of that is understanding how dangerous lead dust, lead-based paint can be. So we discuss what is lead poisoning. Essentially, 1/1000th of that grain of sugar in 1 cup of your blood is all that it takes for you to have a level of concern for lead poisoning. So when workers are disrupting and disturbing large amounts of lead dust, it won't take very much for them to become permanently poisoned. And also poison any of the children in the home and cause long-term, if not permanent, brain damage, as well to women who are pregnant is another concern. So another one is carbon monoxide poisoning. We have to do combustion safety testing on people's furnaces to make sure that they are not being choked out by their own heating systems. So OSHA has a permissible exposure limit for certain hazards. And one of those specific to weatherization is that we have to keep them under 8 parts per million directly from, if possible, from carbon monoxide, and no more than 50 parts per million averaged over an 8-hour period. Because 400 parts per million can be very dangerous for a person's health. And once you get into the higher volumes of carbon monoxide, it can be deadly within minutes. Another one is electrical safety, old retired knob and tube wiring. So weatherization workers have died by just simply crawling into an attic and laying down on electrical wiring and just electrocution on a job site. So high concern for that. Identifying electrical hazards in homes is a big ask. A lot of homeowners don't even know how dangerous their old electrical is. So we have to find out how bad it is. The other ones, there's a million of them. We've had a hantavirus kill one of our employees in the weatherization world in Montana about 10 years ago, and it still weighs on our hearts, knowing that anything from odd client behavior, dangerous activities. Yeah, that there's a lot of things that our workers can come into contact with. So I was told, because of client behavior, dealing with schizophrenic employees or schizophrenic clients, et cetera, with HRDC, I went to non-violent prevention training so that I could learn how to talk people down from crisis scenarios. They saw that as a way to keep me safe in the workplace. So my bosses sent me to training to handle people who are in crisis, as well as PPE training, just teaching us how to use our masks, and how to stay safe in the workplace. But there's a whole lot of hazards out there, and only you workers and employers are the people who can find those hazards. So that's pretty much all I had for you guys. Thanks for sticking around for my long-winded safety talk. I love talking safety, so I appreciate anybody's advice on these subjects, or anybody who wants to come contact us more. Check us out at weatherization.org to learn more about weatherization, or to see what safety trainings we offer. We also do offer basic electrical safety training for anybody in the trades, so non-specific to weatherization. You can just come and take electrical safety training from us. Any other questions or anything else you guys had for us?
I did have one question. Is the weatherization program available to renters and leasers of residential or commercial property as well as owners?
Why don't you take that, Aaron?
Yeah. Yes. The person living in the house has to be the one that qualifies for the program, and it could be somebody that's renting or owning. There are certain things that aren't that most agencies won't do if it's a rental situation. For instance, if the furnace needs to be replaced because of some health and safety issue, then they'll ask the landlord to do it. And I think if the landlord says no, they can still replace it. So there's some different things with landlords, but it's not in any commercial space. So no, all residential, and it has to be a fourplex or smaller.
Thank you.
And all of the classes that we offer are most all of them are open to the public. So anybody in private industry can take our courses if you just pay cash on the barrelhead for them. But most of the trainings we offer are free to weatherization workers and the agency people, anybody within our weatherization network. So that's who we specifically train to, is more of the low income energy assistance program side of weatherization. But we also can offer training to anybody who wants to come take our courses. So if you just want to learn how blower doors work and how to do pressure testing and how to identify lead or asbestos, yeah, feel free to come take our classes.
Thank you. Deborah said she was thankful for what you shared. She's in the process of addressing attic insulation issues and may contact you for advice. How should she contact you?
Yeah. So, Aaron, what do you think?
Yeah, you could call us or email us. It's weatherization.org. All our contact information is on the lower left side of the screen. And yeah, feel free. We are part of Extension, so that is one of our jobs is to advise people out in the community. So definitely feel free to give us a call.
So weatherization.org and email or call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions out there today? All right. Well, thank you so much for being our guest speaker today. Really appreciate all the information and the back and forth on the Q&A. As you mentioned, anyone can contact you by going to weatherization.org and giving a call or sending an email. Our next webinar presentation will be on October 5th, and we're lining up a speaker to talk about building benefits packages for small businesses, and some more things geared toward, employee retention. So hopefully you can make some time for that if that is information that would be helpful for you. 11 o'clock on October 5th. And that should be available to register on our website here probably early next week. So thanks again, Aaron and Nick, and great to have you today. Their email addresses are in the chat if anyone wants to grab those. And we will also be posting the slides online at the end of the program here today.
Oh,
So
it looks like I put oh, it is 6. Okay, that's right, because there's been at least 6 Nicholas Thomases at MSU. So
Yeah, there are 5 other Nicholas Thomases in the Montana University system, and it just pains me to know that.
there's one other Jennifer Stevens at least at UM. So I always have to give my full email address, because if someone emails me just at jennifer.stevens, it goes to the other person. So yes. So thank you so much, and feel free to reach out to our SBDC system and network as well if you have other small business questions. Thank you so much, everyone.
thank you, Jennifer.
Have a great day.